Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostic alongside Katie Greifeld. We're counting you down to the closing bell. You're here to help take us beyond the bell. Carol Massler, Tim Stenovic joining us once again here. Welcome to our audiences across all of our Bloomberg platforms. The price action in the equity market about the same when we last left you, Carol.
Yeah.
But a big reversal in the Treasury space. The sell-off has actually turned into a big bout of buying.
Isn't that interesting in terms, and what do you think it was that maybe Tom Barkin said, telling Mike McKee, of course, the president of the Richmond Federal Reserve? I mean, for me, what was really interesting is how he said he doesn't watch the bond market.
That was Carol's favorite
why
part of the
are we
interview.
so focused? I'm like, he's like basically saying, slow your roll, everybody. Just kind of let it be. But I thought it was interesting, and then to have that kind of bond market reaction, whether it was off of some of his comments or what, I don't know, guys.
Hey, how did you guys find Samir Samana just now? I know you spoke to him before we did at the Wells Fargo Investment Institute. We just spoke to him, and I would say the conversation was, Katie, not quite upbeat. He's calling for a recession early part of next year. He has a year-end price target of 4,000 to 4,200 on the S&P 500. He's worried the Fed's behind.
I wonder who he liked more. Did you ask him that?
He definitely liked us.
Okay.
Yeah, more. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, speaking to him also, pretty bullish on commodities, though, to pair with that. That was pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, I mean, and he didn't seem too dour. I mean, he seemed to suggest that,
maybe we bring out the worst in people.
When you go, I mean, Carol has that effect sometimes. But, when you get deeper into 2024.
Again, I can hear you.
Seems to suggest that. And I actually listened to part of your interview you had with him.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's,
Really?
believe it or not, I do listen to you guys.
Okay.
I mean, love is a strong word, but I
That's
like
true.
it, guys. All right, guys, let's walk through the numbers here on this Thursday afternoon. Higher across the board for all of the major indices here in the U.S. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up by more than 100 points, back around that 33,600 level. About a 0.3% gain on the day. The S&P 500 just a smidge below 4,300, higher by about 0.6%. The Nasdaq Composite higher by 0.8%, and the Russell 2000 posting a similar move higher, about 0.9% on the day.
Yeah, it was kind of like a Sybil kind of day. I feel like we trade like that, right? It's like multiple different trend lines in a day, if you will. But in terms of the equity markets, what really caught my attention was what went on with the SOX, the Philadelphia Stock Exchange Semiconductor Index. 29 of 30 names higher in today's session. The index up 1.8%. Micron, obviously, a bit of a bummer, and that was the only name that was down on the day on that forecast for a worse than expected loss. But man, Katie, that was definitely a group that was a standout in today's session.
Yeah, really interesting to see the rest of the industry rip on a day where Micron obviously did the opposite of that. You take a look at some of the industry groups. You also had autos having a good day, up 2.4%, and then semis, as we were just talking about, up 1.7%. Those were your biggest gainers. You go down the list, there were a few names in the red, not too many, but down there at the bottom, you can see utilities once again in the red. That's some more defensive play, and the mood music was pretty good today. So utilities off about 2.2%.
The moon music?
The mood music.
That's
I say that all the time. I mean something else.
I like that. All right, let's get to some of the individual gainers, if we may. Peloton atop that list, at its highs up more than 12% in today's session, finishing with a gain of about 5.4% on heavy volume, I should point out. News after the close last night, agreeing, I think we all were breaking it down, but we got some more color on it, agreeing to a deal with Lululemon to tap its online workouts and team up on apparel. Lululemon's going to make co-branded clothing that Peloton will sell on its website and at retail stores. And Peloton, meanwhile, will be offered to users of the Lululemon Studio Mirror. So a lot of integration back and forth there. So nonetheless, investors moving into that name. But, I just want to do a quick check. I think Peloton still down almost 40% for the year. And you did have Lululemon.
Why don't you do it from the high?
Well, I
think that would start with a
I had to give it a little bit of lift.
I just want to point out, I'm glad you mentioned the volume on that too, because I mean, that's kind of one of the things that's held this stock back. There just really wasn't a lot of interest in trading it up or down. And I think we're something like 4 to 5 times the average daily volume on this day, 47 million shares.
Where was it at its high? I'm just going to pull it up here.
Yeah.
It was like, what was it? It was a $167 stock, closing the day just under $5. So yeah, you're right. Okay, good point. Advanced Micro Devices, one of the semiconductor names. I just thought I'd throw it in there. Up almost 5% in today's session. As we said, no real news. Also on heavier than normal volume. Shares have gained about 60% year to date on that interest in AI. So just wanted to point that out. Chico's. This was an interesting story. I thought this was really interesting.
Yeah.
Up 63% in today's trade. What?
Yeah, no, go ahead. I mean, I'm fascinated by this. I mean, this was like, you talk about a fallen angel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But Sycamore Partners apparently finding some value, I guess, in this name, and you wonder about what they will do with it. $7.60 per share in cash. Stock closed just below that at $7.52 a share. Brands, of course, White House Black Market, Chico's, and Soma. But I always feel like, those retail names, even though when they fall in hard times, there's always like a buyer, often in the investment world, that finds
But can they kind of get that cachet back? Because it seemed like there was this period, I don't know, like 10, 15 years ago where they were kind of all the rage amongst like, a certain cohort of women. And then it just kind of, I don't know, it just never really evolved, the styles or anything. And I don't know if Sycamore could do something with it, great, but I don't know.
I actually, no kidding, I have a Chico's cardigan sitting at my desk right now.
Do you really?
I do.
Right next to your
Are you that sort of kind of women? Like, how did you
I don't know, apparently. I don't know.
Biggest move since 1993
Well, it's
when
massive.
the company went public.
Wow.
There you go.
At the highest level since 2018.
I remember where it was in 1993.
Do you?
Yeah.
You don't?
I was barely alive.
All right, let's
Thank
do
you,
decliners.
Yeah.
Carol has the gainers. I'm going to go ahead and do decliners.
This is what she just
CarMax
said.
finishing the day down more than 13%.
focused on the
Biggest
bond
decline for
market right now.
CarMax in more than a year. Shares falling after the company fell short of analyst profit estimates for the current quarter. Sales lower amid higher interest rates. Higher rates for loans weigh on the used car business, of course. CarMax, get this, said the decline in profits was the result of higher prices, higher rates, tightened lending standards, and lower consumer confidence. Used vehicle sales down 7.4% from a year ago. The company's CEO telling investors that some customers are trading down to different cars so they can afford those higher payments. When interest rates go up, that means those monthly payments go up. Shares of Micron finishing the day lower as well. They fell after the company predicted a steeper loss than anticipated in the current quarter. Shares down 4.41% today. That indicates an industry slump is still weighing on the largest U.S. maker of memory chips. And shares of Workday falling the most since 2020. This after the company trimmed its long-term forecast for annual subscription revenue growth. This was during an investor presentation earlier today. Shares down by 8.5%.
All right, let's take a quick look at what went on in yields. At some point on the day here, it looked like we were going to get a continuation of that bond sell-off, but we did see a reversal here late in the session here with some buying coming back in, and of course that ended up shifting the curve down across the board, down about 7.5 basis points on your 2-year yield. On the longer end of the curve, it was a little bit less dramatic, only about 1 or 2 basis points there here. But it really gets more to this whole idea, guys, of just the volatility that we continue to see in the Treasury space, a Treasury market that, of course, is supposed to be the most liquid, the less riskiest, and of course, it's trading on certain days like a meme stock. And of course, Tom Barkin says he doesn't even pay attention to it. Should point out here, I mean, since I know how much you love Fed speak, Carol Master, that Jay Powell is actually speaking right now. He's actually hosting a virtual event. This is basically a town hall with educators. You see him there on the screen there, basically talking about education and I guess that education is good. We're going to listen into that and bring you any headlines as we get them. If you do want to listen into it yourself, just type live go on the Bloomberg terminal.
And we do know that Jerome Powell definitely pays attention to the bond market. Last Wednesday, of course, he mentioned real yields a number of times. Of course, that is yields that take into account the impact of inflation.
I thought that was the name of your show, Katie.
It is, actually. And real yields, again, when you strip out the impact of inflation, that is, they're extremely high right now. I know we've been spending a lot of time talking about the size and scope and nominal yields, but the real yield matters because you think about the borrowing costs for all of these companies that we talk about all the time. That's what it is. That's the tightening of financial conditions.
Can we go back to Jay Powell? Because I'm just reading Craig Torres and Laura Curtis putting out a story. And Jay Powell saying the Fed's ability to influence the economy depends on whether, quote, people understand what we are saying. When Fed officials publish their projections for interest rates in the economy, quote, one of our goals is to influence spending and investment decisions today and in the months ahead.
Well, we know they influence the decision-making of executives at
that was
companies, but I don't know, Romaine, how much the actual regular person who's going out and spending money actually cares what the Fed has to say about inflation.
But he's talking about people like understanding, like their financing.
Well, inflation
and
expectations are very
that,
important, and that's why high oil prices are such a concern for the Fed.
Yeah, but it gets to the idea too. Like, I mean, he doesn't necessarily have to speak to, the people on the ground. You speak to the financial markets and the economists, and in theory, that sort of message trickles down. And we know that this is a Fed, at least in terms of policy, where the communication mechanism today is probably way more important than the policy change itself.
If you're going to, going to the grocery store and it's like, $18 for a pound of deli meat, do you need the Fed to tell you that inflation is high?
Yeah, but maybe you'd like to hear the Fed say that they care a lot about it and explain in plain English what they're doing about it.
Well, I just printed up all these little stickers of Jay Powell, and it just says, I did that, and I put it right next to the price of eggs.
That was you?
Yeah, that was
really?
me. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I have a lot of free time.
Apparently.
This show isn't my life.
Don't you feel like every
just
day,
3 hours.
everybody, we learn something new about Romaine Bosnick?
Try.
You
I
don't want to
know,
know.
I know.
I still love that suit.
Thank you, Tim. I love the suit too.
I love when the guys
Very
do
nice.
this. Where's your tie, Tim?
No,
Still
That's
learning
it.
the
Tim
time.
hasn't worn a tie since 1993.
That is
He
true.
has not. All right, guys, that's a wrap. Our cross-platform coverage, radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals. We will see you again. It will be Friday tomorrow. Join us for our coverage at 3 and 4 p.m.